In this video, I'm going to show you my approach for painting ears, specifically dog ears that have short hair, are tall, or have a little bit of a flop at the top. Ears are one of my favorite pet portrait features to paint because it utilizes one of my favorite techniques. It's fast to paint. You don't have to be extremely accurate in terms of proportions or features. You can showcase a lot of color if you want to, and most of all, you can let watercolor work its magic. Hi, I'm Jess, and I teach artists how to approach watercolor in a unique way using my 3-3-3 method. You can find all the supplies I'm using for this video in my downloadable supply list and also in the video's description. Let's paint! For this first example, I'm going to show you how to paint ears using my basic 3-step process, where first we'll paint with water, then we'll drop in color from dark to light, and then finally, we're going to finish the ears by using my favorite techniques for matte or dry paper. You'll see I've painted the general shape of the ear with plain water. I don't quite go all the way to the edges, and I like to leave white space in certain sections where there's maybe a highlight or a fun feature I want to make sure I emphasize. From there, I just pick up some neutral tint, which is my black color, with my size 6 round brush, to paint the darkest darks of the ear. Then I'm going in with quinacridone gold, and it mixes a little bit with that neutral tint to do the next shade lighter. You'll see as I'm painting that I use my grainer brush to emphasize the areas, and especially the edges, where there is longer hair. So basically I'm just pulling that wet paint down into the dry paper using that grainer brush to make that fur texture. Now I've mixed up a nice bright orange using rich ochre and azo yellow, and I've also mixed up a purple using, again, rich ochre and ultramarine blue, and I'm gonna drop in that orange and that purple in the highlight and the shadow areas of the ear. Again, coming in with my grainer brush to pull the paint around to depict furry areas. Now we're on to step 3, where we're using some techniques to create texture on the top. And I'm employing my favorite technique of scraping by using the back side of my palette knife to scrape the paint off of the surface of the paper during what I like to call the matte stage, where the paint is still wet but almost dry. Before I move on to the other ear, I add a little bit of plain water to the center of the ear to push the paint away and create a larger highlight. And now I repeat the same process with the other ear. First painting with water, then going in with my darkest dark neutral tint, then quinacridone gold, my highlight orange, and my shadow purple, all the while making sure I utilize that wet paint and push it with a grainer brush to create those furry edges. Finishing off with scraping on the top and even adding a little bit more water in the center to again push that wet paint away and create some fun texture with watercolor. Now the paint is dry on both ears, and I like to go back in with my grainer brush and add a little bit more fur on the top with whatever color and whatever area I think might need a little bit more furry texture. One of my 3 watercolor principles is contrast, and for portraits I usually like to have a light side and a dark side. So when you're painting ears, I want you to keep this principle in mind and have a light ear and a dark ear. The dark ear can have more of that shadow color, in this case we're using purple, and the light ear can in general have less paint and more of that highlight color. Once the ear on the light side of my portrait was fully dry, I added a nice thick line of the highlight color using my flat brush to emphasize that principle of contrast. In general, I use this 3-step process every time I paint. However, when painting something with very precise proportions, like eyes or nose and muzzles on dogs and cats, I will sometimes paint dark black outlines to help me keep my proportions correct before I start the 3-step process. And you can see that that's what I'm doing for this second example here. I simply started with a little bit of a black outline before I followed through with the rest of the 3-step process. And this example is very similar to the first one, where after I've established that black outline, I'm painting it with water, adding my colors from dark to light, and then finishing it off with some texture techniques. You'll see that I made sure to emphasize that flop at the top with that black outline. The highlight color for this example is more of a pink color, rich ochre with buff titanium. And as I'm adding my color in the second step, I'm using my grainer brush for that fur texture. I have a dark side ear and a light side ear. And in general, I just incorporated more of a black line for this particular portrait because I liked that look. Finishing off with some scraping, and that's it. Give this video a thumbs up if it helped you, and don't forget to grab your supply list at paint333.com. Happy painting!